Welcome to the Wellness Project with Des. I'm your host, Des, a mental health therapist and holistic wellness coach. On this podcast, I bring you conversations with experts in mental health and wellness, along with powerful firsthand stories from those who have navigated their own mental health journeys. Together, we explore practical tips, tools, and strategies to support your well being, offering hope, encouragement, and inspiration along the way. I'm so grateful that you're here. If you enjoy the show, I'd love for you to take a moment to leave a review on iTunes and rate the podcast 5 stars on Spotify. Your support helps the Wellness Project with Des to grow, bringing even more incredible guests and valuable insights to our community. And make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss a thing. Enjoying the podcast? Stay tuned until the end to find out how you can support the show and ways we can work together. Now let's dive in. Hey there, it's Des, your host of the Wellness Project with Des. I hope you are having a wonderful day. I hope you're having a great week. You are listening to episode number 192, and today I am speaking with Wendy Leggett. And this is a really great conversation because we are talking about retirement. But when we think of retirement, we typically, I think a lot of people, especially maybe younger people, think about the financial side of retirement, our investments, our 401ks, our 403bs, our IRAs, our Roth IRAs. We think about our pensions, all of that kind of stuff, and getting all that stuff in order, which is so, so important, right? We definitely want all that in order. But something that Wendy realized was that when working with clients as a coach and just people in her personal life and her social circles, was that people were really struggling with the transition of retirement. And I've experienced this in the past as well, where, and I do mention it in this episode, where I worked at Macy's and a lot of my coworkers, I was one of the youngest people working there because a lot of my coworkers were older and they were retired, but they had a really hard time in retirement, didn't want to be retired, and decided to rejoin the workforce part-time. I also see this working in the schools. A lot of the paras were retired and came out of retirement. So something Wendy is going to be talking about with us today is how to plan for the non-financial side of retirement and really thinking about your days, how you can have a fulfilling retirement, how you can get along well with your partner. If you're both retired or one of you is retired, this changes the relationship dynamic so much because you've been working, all your life and now both of you are just home. So definitely changes those kind of routines and things like that. Really looking at how you want your retirement to be and how you can still engage with different things like your passions or explore hobbies or maybe translate your skills from your profession or your working life to things that you can do in your retirement to maybe build community or support others or volunteer, different things like that. Because I think that it's easy to think, I don't want to work anymore. Working is hard, right? Getting up every day early and commuting, whatever the case may be, is very difficult. But I think that we are creatures of habit. We need something to do. And I think that when you wake up and there's just nothing to do, no really reason to get out of bed, nothing to have you keep going, there's nothing motivating, that is really, really challenging. So really thinking about that and how you can plan to have a very fulfilling retirement, because as Wendy explains, the people she has worked with have had a really hard time with this transition, and this is a major transition, an exciting one, but a major life transition. I mean, this is a whole new chapter. So we are talking about how to plan for a fulfilling, healthy retirement. So we're not going to be talking about the financial side. We're going to be talking about kind of the social side, the mental health aspect of it. So if you are currently retired, if you are approaching retirement, even if you're younger and retirement is a far way off, really starting to think about realistically, what do you want your retirement to look like? So I hope you enjoy this conversation. It's a really great one. I'm really looking forward to hearing it. Help me welcome Wendy. Wendy, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, it's fantastic to join you. Thanks, Des.
Yeah, I am so looking forward to this conversation because we are talking about retirement, but so often when we hear the word retirement, what do we think of? We think of money, finances. But we are
Yes.
talking about the non financial side of retirement, which I'm really, really excited about. But before we get into all of that good stuff, I would love if you could take some time to introduce yourself and share your story to us.
Oh, I appreciate that. I'm Wendy Leggett. I am the owner of Conflex Retirement Coaching, but I wasn't always in an owner of a company. I started off with being in sales leadership in all kinds of different companies, from fashion. I was with Nordstrom to Fortune 50, with telecom, to franchises. So quite a variety of different opportunities to really empower my team members, meet and exceed numbers, and really connect with clients. So I always really loved that. And I was involved in that work for about 25 years. But I came to a juncture, and maybe some of your listeners have had this happen too, where the company that I was working for was sold. And the new owner came in with a very different approach to the clients and to the employees. And it was really, really difficult to try to find that path that I could still feel good about what I was presenting to clients and still feel good about how employees were being treated. And so I tried every which way, and I think we all kind of do that at times. We try to fix the problem, but it got to that point where it was really almost soul sucking. So I came to that crossroads, do I continue on? And I knew I couldn't. Do I continue then in the same kind of work? Or do I now look at this as an opportunity? And so I dug really deep and I did a lot of exploration and I discovered coaching, which was a new thing to me, but it was this opportunity to bring all of my capabilities that I'd had around coaching, but then bring myself forward more, and really have myself as the service as opposed to some other product or service that I'd been promoting before. So that was really quite a big change for me. I went back to school. So that was really an amazing difference because I haven't been in school for a long time. And it was really energizing, but out of my comfort zone. And then achieved getting certifications in as a professional certified coach. Then I took it several steps further and deepened into retirement because I was seeing that a number of my people in my social circle, as well as some of my clients, were really struggling in retirement. And that was a shocker to me because, when we think about retirement, we usually think, oh, wow, endless weekends, leisure travel, who could have a struggle? But the reality is a lot of people do. And so I wanted to be able to serve my clients and support my friends more. And so I actually discovered that there are certifications in retirement coaching. And so I dug a bit deeper in that as well as some other areas. And so that's who I serve for about the last 5 years. And that's the business that I have designed is helping people with the non-financial piece of retirement.
Yeah, that's really great. I love that you bring this up because years ago, oh my gosh, it was probably like 15 years ago, I worked at Macy's and I was just part-time because I was going to college at the time. And I was one of the youngest people there because everyone was retired. Everyone working there was retired. And so all of my coworkers were these elderly ladies.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were saying that they didn't like being retired, that they felt like they just had no life. They didn't like have a reason to get up in the morning. And I've been experiencing that too in the last few years that, I work in the school system and a lot of the paras are retired and
Mm.
come out of retirement because they just have a hard time retiring.
Yeah, so you've seen it, and so you've seen that struggle, and I think so often does that because the focus is on the financial piece of it, that we just think that everything else will fall into place. But when we really think about those different milestones in our lives, the decisions and the planning wasn't only around the financial. Like when you went from school to career, yes, it was important what the financial piece would be with that career, but I'm going to think that most of us, hopefully all of us, were able to make decisions based on what was of interest to us or where our capabilities lie or what the culture was like or what, some of the other things about that company, not just the paycheck. And I think that's that same view that we need to carry forward in every time that we transition into a new chapter of our lives, including retirement. But it is overlooked. And so as you're sharing, with the individuals that you saw, they may well not have recognized or realized that when they were in career one day and then out the next, that there was this possible loss of identity, this loss of purpose, this loss of clarity, or even connection. So, all of those things and more are really important to bring to the surface too, and have what I want for everybody is a runway to retirement, being able to kind of step into it so that one day we're not in work and the next day we're out and we're in the honeymoon phase and we're traveling and doing the bucket list and the to-do list. And then, like you said, now what? And it's not really measuring up to what it could be or what we thought it would be.
Right. So you mentioned that like loss of identity, loss of connection, I think is a huge one.
Yes.
Loss of purpose. Is there anything that with the people you're working with or stories that you've heard or just considerations going into retirement, things that are overlooked that maybe people aren't considering as they're going into retirement, if they really are focused on that kind of financial piece, maybe things that they should be thinking about or considering?
Just being able to recognize what's our perspective when we're retiring, because oftentimes that is someone that's in an older adult and starts to possibly look at life now as kind of on the downslope. And so looking ahead with that kind of aging and loss and maybe even one foot into the grave. So it's really important that we look at what's our mindset, what's our perspective. And if it is on that half empty view, maybe what would help to shift it into that half full, being able to look maybe at gratitude, maybe being able to look at what more can we bring forward, what can we contribute. I've had clients say before that they feel invisible. And so that's that view of feeling less than. And so we really delve into, well, where's that feeling coming from? And what makes that true? And what can we do to maybe move forward? So that whole piece around the transition and recognizing that we are moving into a new role, but we're not moving into a whole new book. We bring a lot with us into this next chapter. And so bringing forward some of those strengths, retiring with things instead of retiring to things. So that's a really important piece. I can keep going on. Does that raise any questions before I add some other things or?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about that. I feel invisible. I think societally, we really are focused on youth. I think there's this whole population that are kind of invisible, right? Even movies that come out and commercials, it's very youth focused, right? So
Yes.
I would imagine that along with the kind of loss of identity of that professional aspect, like this was my career or my job, or, these were my group of colleagues, that kind of identity, there's also this just maybe societal loss. Like, I don't know, I feel like at retirement, it's like, oh, like I am a retiree. That means that I am old. There are
Yeah.
people that retire young, but when you think of it, you typically think of an older person. So that's such a huge identity shift. And it's there's a day where one day you were working and one day you were not. And that's very drastic. I would imagine it's almost like a grieving process of the chapter that has ended.
Yeah, I think that's a very insightful comment. What I really help clients with is understanding the power of transitions. And so there's a lot of work, prolific work by William Bridges and Bruce Feiler around the whole navigating transitions. And before I became a coach, I didn't realize that transitions and change are very different. We change roles. Let's say when I was promoted from one position to another, I'm changing those roles. That's the external. But what's going on internally? What's happening? What are the changes that are happening inside of me? How do I view myself? What am I going to bring with me into that new role? I didn't look at that. I just jumped into the new beginning and got going. And potentially, and I think looking back, I brought some baggage with me or some habits or patterns that didn't serve me. So that's the same as we move into retirement, is really recognizing that we're in a transition. And so it's not linear, but there are three stages. There's the ending. So we start with the ending and we really look at whether it's grieving a loss or whether it's rituals or whether it's just recognizing what do we want to put a period or an exclamation mark on. the second part of that is looking at what's called the neutral zone or the messy middle. And this is where we can start to have difficult emotions, challenging emotions that we didn't expect. We might have, as you said, that grieving or that sense of loss. It could be that we're stressed out, we're stuck, we're feeling overwhelmed. We could be really anticipatory, really excited. But there's all these different emotions that if we can take that time and give it space and grace to recognize what's happening for us, then it signals to what we need in order to be able to move forward. So that's what happens in that neutral or messy middle zone. And then the third is then the new beginning. And so often what happens, Desiree, is that people jump when they go from career to retirement, they jump right to that new beginning and they fill up their dance card and they get really busy and they get committed to so many things, sometimes overcommitted. And so then it starts to feel like, wow, this isn't necessarily what I thought it was going to be, or it's not feeling as gratifying as I wanted it to, or it's starting to feel like Groundhog's Day, same old, same old. So if we don't jump right ahead into the new beginning and we do walk ourselves through these steps, that becomes very supportive and very foundational. And that applies for retirement, but it applies for all of our life transitions when we go from school to career, when we go from single to married, when we go from a renter to a homeowner, any of those transitions. And so it's important that we do give ourselves that opportunity to reflect and see what's coming up for us. And in the demographic that tends to be in the retirement age, we weren't raised with positive psychology. We weren't raised to say that emotions are important signals. They're not good or bad. They're just a flag that says, hey, this needs more attention. And so instead, we would push things down or push things aside. And now we've learned that this isn't healthy for us and that those feelings don't go away. They might stay and fester and grow, or they may be moving us in a direction that's not authentic to us. So I'm sharing a lot there, but I feel really strongly about that in order to shift that mindset, we need to be able to really recognize what's going on for us and how are we feeling about this idea of retiring? How are we feeling about aging? How are we feeling about no longer being in that career that we've been in for decades?
Right. I think that's a really important framework, really helpful for people to go in knowing there's this like new beginning stage, neutral, this like messy kind of middle, and that ending. Really like how you framed that because I think a lot of people, I don't know, with the people you work with, I feel like a lot of people don't really think about retirement that much, especially younger people, I would say. But I think that especially if you're in a career or working, that you're so busy and have a lot going on that I don't know if a lot of people are putting a lot of thought into what comes after. I think kind of like you said, like, oh, I'm going to retire and I'm going to travel and do this and that, but maybe not think of the like realistic day to day. Like you wake up and you have really maybe nothing to do. And I think that could be really hard for a lot of people. What do you do to kind of support people? I know, like you said, everybody's different and has different emotions about it and different expectations, but how
Yeah.
can people set realistic expectations and really think about their day to day? And I also had a question about how this comes up with partners, because I know a lot of people struggle when they're either retiring at the same time or they're going to be the next ones to retire. Maybe their partner has retired already and
Yeah.
people really get into their routines and now both people are just kind of home and a lot of people struggle with that.
They certainly do. I appreciate you mentioning that, when people are so busy with their careers or if the time horizon seems so far out that they're not really thinking about, retiring. But at any age or life stage, if we can start to build in that runway and recognize that we are all going to get older and retirement is kind of almost a passe word. It's a shared vocabulary right now, but I think we're all seeing that so many people continue to stay involved in career way past what would typically have been that 62, 65 age. So it's not really about an age as much as how do you someone define retirement? And if they're looking to move from career into that next chapter, then really stepping into it fully. So I'm a retirement coach, but I don't advocate to retire. I just say that if you're planning to retire, then do it well and have this runway. So again, at any age or life stage, you can start to pepper in trying to achieve, just eke out a little bit of time to build that hobby or interest, eke out a little bit of time to stay connected with your friends, eke out a little bit of time to add something else that feels meaningful in your life, because then you'll have this smoother passage into this next chapter. But the things that I help people with, it really, a lot of it revolves around what feels meaningful and purposeful to you. And we always hear about you need to find purpose, and that just can be a showstopper. It can be so overwhelming. Like, how do we even find purpose? But there's a lot of work by Richard Leiter where he shares that you can have purpose with a capital P or you can have it with a small p. But it's not a noun, it's a verb, it's an action. So instead of finding purpose, feeling purposeful and finding those ways that we can weave that meaning and fulfillment into our lives, because purpose is baked into our work. We don't recognize it, but there is that sense of achievement, or there's that aspiration, or there's those goals. And when we leave work, again, we can leave some of those feelings of meaning and fulfillment behind. So recognizing that that's a really important part. We all need to feel like we matter. We all need to feel like there's a reason to get up in the morning, like you said, and things to look forward to. So I really do work with clients around what are their values, what are those touchstones for them, and then what feels meaningful to them. And we go through an exercise of thinking back when you were younger, what really got you charged up? Or if nobody was watching, what would you do? Or if it didn't really matter, what would you step into? Or if there was no risk. So we go through quite a bit of that and really start to excavate what starts to connect for someone. Additionally, oftentimes people think, again, that this is a whole new book rather than a new chapter, and they're starting all over. And so we work also at what can you bring with you into retirement? What are all those skills, capabilities, passions that you had at work that maybe you don't want to do that post career, but you can translate it. So if you've been a teacher, maybe you're going to want to volunteer. Well, one of my clients decided to volunteer at the prisons, being able to help people improve their lot in life. If you were a business owner, maybe you want to help not in your own business, but help new startups with some of your capabilities. So just being able to translate and transfer some of that. So we're not starting over, we're building upon the things that really are of interest to us. So that's an exploration that we go through as well. There's a lot more that we do on that, but I don't want to lose your question about when we're couples are retiring. And that is such an important area that, again, I think is overlooked. If we don't have a vision for ourselves of what that next chapter can look like, then we can enter into it as a couple with neither of us having a vision or communicating and collaborating on it. And so we can see right there that there can be a real disconnect, and we can start to veer off in different paths. And we are seeing the number of divorces going up in this demographic. And I think in part, not fully, but in part because people have these expectations and they have these assumptions of what's going to happen post career, and then they're very disappointed. Some of that disappointment may be in themselves because they didn't have clarity, but it can also be then really magnified by not having that clarity with their significant other. I want to mention too that a lot of studies have been done that show that, and this is generalities, but that men tend to look at retirement as a time of rest and relaxation, and women have a different view of it as a time of resurgence and reinvention. And so right there we can see that we're going off in different directions. So I have a really powerful kind of conversation starter assessment that couples can take. They take it individually and then come together, and it's a really great communication tool so that they can see, okay, this is my view, this is mine, what conversation do we want to have? Because it's very healthy to have your individual interests as well, and then come together as a couple also. So, you don't have to walk down the path together all the time. You can go your different directions and then bring that back, and that can really enrich the relationship as well.
Yeah, I really like that you bring that up. That is so interesting. I've never heard that men and women kind of have these different ideas of retirement and what it looks like. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And like you said, yeah, we're already with the idea going off in different directions and maybe valuing retirement in a different way. And I would imagine that going into retirement would bring up different things for different people, whether you're in a relationship, quality of that relationship, if it is a good quality relationship, or maybe if it's toxic or abusive, that'll bring up a whole bunch of other issues. And if somebody is retiring, maybe they're single or widowed, I would imagine that brings up their own unique kind of thoughts and perspectives on retirement as well.
Yes, yeah, and that's where it's so important then that we meet individuals where they stand, what their situation is, and really being able to then look at where do they want to go. But having that vision is really important. And it doesn't mean that you have to be locked and loaded on, an outcome. It's really just recognizing what direction you want to go in, because it's just like when we get in a car, if we don't know where we're going, we're going to just be driving around and maybe we'll happen upon something, but likely we won't, or we'll use up a lot of gas or be frustrated. Same works with retirement. We want to have that vision so that we're moving in a direction that feels aligned with what feels good to us.
Yeah, I love that analogy. When it comes to thinking about retirement, is there any sort of time frame that you would recommend people start to plan their retirement out or get, on the same page with their partners about retirement? Is there any sort of kind of time frame there?
Sure. Yeah, like that 1 to 3 years before you retire is kind of that sweet spot. If you're a business owner, then I recommend sooner, with more of a runway because then transitioning. And everybody's situation is different. We have to kind of key into who we are as well. I've had clients start with me 5 years before because they tend to like to be more planful, or maybe they have a lot of things going on in their life and they need to start to kind of clear things out a little bit. Um, and I've had clients that have started with me and gotten so excited about their vision that then they decided to retire earlier because they were able to. And then I've had a few that decided as we work together that no, they really aren't ready to retire. And that's fantastic also. So it really is more about that exploration and that self-discovery that I help guide people with. But that 1 to 3 years tends to be really, really great. And the reason that it's great, I should mention, is that that does give you that chance to experiment a little, put your toe in, try some things out without getting fully committed. And it also allows you to have that smoother transition so that one day you're not in and the next day you're out. So often people say, oh, I'll get healthy when, I'll eat better when, or I'll contact my friends again when. And so instead, as I shared earlier in the conversation, take those little steps along the way. Then it really does allow for that much smoother transition because oftentimes people go into retirement, there's that honeymoon phase, that's 6 months to 2 years generally. And then for some, the ones that struggle, it's like you're falling off a cliff. Then they become very disconnected or very disenchanted with all of it. And we don't want that for anyone because we all can contribute to the world and to ourselves and our loved ones throughout our lives. And so we don't, and that's why I'm passionate about the work I do because there's still too much for each of us to offer. And so we want to feel encouraged and have that kind of mindset that yes, I matter and I have things to contribute.
Yeah, it's so important to keep in mind because I don't know currently, but I read this study years ago, and just a lot has changed with mental health in the last few years. But I read a study that said the elderly are the most depressed population. And
Mm.
I think that makes a lot of sense because it is that kind of loss of identity, loss of connection, connecting with people, colleagues, families. Now in our generations, families are not located in the same place anymore. People move and families are really separated right now. I think that is important to keep in mind to plan ahead that you want to foster any connections you can. And I like that you mentioned before, too, that looking at it as kind of an opportunity. Maybe there's things that you've been wanting to do or different parts of yourself that you've been wanting to explore, wanting to experiment with, but haven't had the time or energy because maybe people were working full time and very busy and commuting and just didn't have the time or energy then. And maybe this is a good opportunity to explore those other aspects.
Yeah. Yeah. We focus a lot on physical fitness, but we oftentimes overlook mental fitness, which is that mindset that we kind of touched upon. And I didn't dig deeper into the concept of a growth mindset and a pro-aging, not anti-aging mindset. And then also that social fitness. So often if we stop really reaching out to people or putting ourselves out there, we get really uncomfortable and that muscle can kind of atrophy. So it's important that we keep that muscle going, but it's never too late to make fresh friends. It's never too late to reach out to someone that you've not been in contact with. One of my clients had said that she had been so immersed in her work that she had really let a lot of friendships go by the wayside, and now it was too late that she had retired. And I really challenged her to say, "What's too late?" Well, I haven't been in contact with them for a while, and I said, "Well, if they called you, how would you receive that call?" And she said, "Oh, I would love that." And I said, "What would it take for you to be that person?" And so then she did make a list and contacted people and was really gratified by it. And everybody was really happy to connect. But it is uncomfortable a little bit, but that's where we find our growth is when we're willing to just push the envelope just a little bit and go out of our comfort zone just a little bit. That's where we can really see really wonderful things happen.
Oh, I fully agree with that. And I love that you mentioned that idea of positive aging. And like I mentioned before, just societally, in our media, it's very pro youth. And, a lot of what's getting pushed now is like plastic surgeries now and like looking younger. So I think with that idea of retirement, right, we think of like, oh, elderly and like you said before, one foot in the grave. So I
Yeah.
think a lot of people may struggle with that idea of, oh, my life is over. It's all downhill from here. What do I have to look forward to now? So how do you work with your clients on that mindset and shifting to that kind of pro aging, positive aging mindset and outlook?
Just trying to be pretty succinct about it, I do have a certification in what's called positive intelligence. It's the work by Shirzad Shamin, and it's the idea that we all have saboteurs. We all have these negative voices in our heads that bring up then an avoider saboteur, or a pleaser, or a victim saboteur. And so really being able to catch that saboteur, that difficult emotion, and not allow it to hijack us and recognize that that's taking us off in that direction, like you're saying, where we start to have then this mindset that's that half empty. So going through this, then we shift into what's called a sage perspective and we become more empathetic with ourselves or with others. We quiet the judge in ourselves that questions us. We explore opportunities, we innovate, we look at what else is possible. We look at, if we reverse engineer, we look at our wiser elder self, what would we be telling ourselves? And we get into action. So those are all those sage qualities as opposed to allowing the saboteur to bring us down. And going through this process, when we start to really focus on the positive, science backs up that we are able to then start to build those new neural pathways. And so that neuroplasticity is something that we really want to try to take advantage of. So that's something that I would really want to share with folks, look into that a little bit because we know that our survivor brain just skews to that negative, to keep us safe, but it doesn't belong in our society any longer. And so we need to actively have that mental fitness, build that mental muscle to then skew to the positive. And the way that we do that is through positive self-talk and through really recognizing when things are going in a negative direction, what's going on for me here and how can I convert it and see the gift and opportunity.
Really thinking about this, it's such a big transition, and so many emotions may come up. Things may arise, especially if you're retiring with a partner or your partner's already retired. And I just think, besides that connection, connecting with maybe family or old friends, looking for support, I think is going to be so important. Like somebody like you, like a coach, a retirement coach specifically, maybe a therapist. I just think that this may be something that people don't really think about and understand the weight of and how difficult of a transition it can be, even though some people may have a really positive, they're excited, have this really great outlook about it. Transitions, just even exciting ones, are very hard sometimes.
Yeah, well, and I think too that oftentimes because of the media, because of what we see socially and things, we don't realize that there is this struggle that goes on. If you ask people, how's retirement going? Generally, they're going to say it's great. And if somebody raised their hand and said, I'm struggling, the response could very well be, "Well, how can you be complaining? You're so lucky to not be working." So it is that dirty little secret that people don't raise their hand. And yet, as I shared, 1 in 3 struggle in retirement. So it's critically important that the message I really want people to hear is that it's normal. This is a new phase in life. We don't have as strong of a template for it as we do for others because the focus is so much on the financial. But if you are feeling like you're concerned about or you have difficult emotions, challenging emotions, you're not alone. That's normal. Then begs the time to give it, to nurture yourself and start to understand, well, what's coming up for me? And like you said, if you need support around it, or you want to journal about it, meditate on it, whatever it is that will be of support to you, but don't overlook it. I had one client who was just beside herself about thinking about retirement. She was so despondent. Like when you said grief, for her, it was, she said she felt a part of her was dying. When I was just able to share with her that she wasn't alone, that alone just opened up the skies for her because so many of her family members had retired and she viewed them as having just the best time in life. And she thought there was something really wrong with her. And so that just took a huge weight off of her shoulders right there that no, there was nothing wrong with you. And what you're going through is this recognition that that role that you've been in is going to be changing, but you're not losing yourself. We're just now moving you into the next chapter and what's going to fuel you. And she's the one that ended up leaving from teaching and working in the prisons. I really want to carry that message forward that if any of your listeners or if they have people in their lives that are struggling or they're sensing they are, that's totally normal. And let's support them and let's really help so that people do know that they matter, that they are contributors, that there's so much more that they can give to us.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love that you are here with us today because, like you said, we focus so much on the financial aspect of retiring and not the transition aspect. So I think it is such an important conversation to have. Wendy, I thank you so much for being here. Do you have any last words of wisdom or advice for our listeners that may be transitioning into retirement, or maybe they're retired newly and they're having a bit of a hard time?
It really is giving yourself that time to think about what feels good to you. So it's not just the activities, it's not just the doing, it's the being. It's not just that external, it's really keying into what feels right to you, what feels meaningful, what aligns with your values. So if you're already retired and you're finding that you're just busy, 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 or you're not busy at all, really then think about, well, what would feel fulfilling to me and just take a little toe, a step in. We don't have to make big decisions or big changes. If you haven't retired yet, then I really, really encourage people to have this runway to retirement and start thinking about how can you weave just a little bit in your day to day. We can always eke out a little bit of time. I know we're so busy, but you are a priority. Invest in you, not just in our portfolio, but invest in ourselves, and take that leadership of yourself to make sure that your future is a bright one.
Oh, great. Wendy, I love that. I would love if you can share where everyone can find you.
I appreciate that. So my company name, as I shared, is Conflex Retirement Coaching, and that's my website, conflexretirementcoaching.com. You can reach out to me at Wendy at conflexretirementcoaching.com. But on my website, there's a lot of blogs, there's lots of information, and I certainly welcome if anyone would like to have a discovery call with me. And I'd like to offer to your listeners that I do have a no regret retirement reflection. And it does allow people to start to envision what that next chapter can look like, what each day and year, everything's going to look like, what kind of bubbles up as priorities, or what might start to seem like, oh, that Groundhog's Day that I mentioned earlier. And so I'd love to send that out to anyone that would like to request that.
Oh, amazing. I will have all of the links in the show notes. Everyone, go check out Wendy. Wendy, thank you so much for being here and having this important conversation with us.
Oh, I so appreciated your insightful questions. It was really fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful. For detailed show notes, go to accordingtodez.com/, and then whatever episode number this is. So again, that's accordingtodez.com/episode number. If you'd like to work together, you can schedule a free coaching consult call, or you can join my Mindful Monday support group. Links are in the show notes. You'll also find a curated list of books written by or recommended by my amazing podcast guests on my Amazon storefront, so be sure to check that out. If you loved this episode, share it and tag me on social media. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at The Wellness Project with Des. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment. For more wellness resources, you can visit my website, accordingtodez.com. There you'll find wellness blogs, expert interviews, and a wide variety of digital products like ebooks, audio meditations, and downloadable journals to support your mental health and personal growth. If you gain value from this podcast, consider supporting the show by buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/The Wellness Project with Des. Your support helps the podcast to grow and allows me to continue bringing you incredible guests and valuable content. While you're at it, join my email list to stay in the loop on everything I have available for you. As a thank you, you'll receive a free downloadable coloring book with positive affirmations. I'd also love for you to join my Facebook community where we dive deeper into each episode with discussions, journal prompts, reflections, and mental health and wellness content. It's a supportive space, and I'm there daily. Come say hi. The link is in the show notes. And don't forget to check out my Redbubble shop. The Wellness Project by Des, my collection of mental health and wellness products, is designed to uplift and inspire. From fun and uplifting apparel to motivational notebooks and bags, you can browse the collection at my Redbubble shop, and be sure to favorite my store because I'm always adding new designs. And if you have a custom idea, feel free to message me. I'd love to create something special for you. Thank you so much for being here. I'll be back soon with another episode, and until then, I hope you have a calm and peaceful week.